Hashtag the solitary soul. The early morning light filtered through thin curtains as Imani Carter opened her eyes. Another day, another shift at the hospital. She stretched and looked around her small apartment. Everything was in its place, neat, clean, and painfully empty. 23 years had passed since the car crash that took her parents. Imani could barely remember their faces now, just the warm feeling of her mother's hugs and her father's hearty laugh. What remained crystal clear was the hollowed feeling that grew inside her chest as she moved from one foster home to another. "You're too quiet," one foster mother had said. "You need to smile more," another told her. By the time she turned 18, Imani had lived in 7 different homes. None of them bad exactly, just temporary. Places where she slept and ate, but never truly belonged. Nursing school had been her escape. While other students complained about long hours and difficult patients, Imani found purpose in the work. Caring for others filled a space inside her that nothing else could. At Metropolitan Hospital in Philadelphia, she was known as the nurse who stayed late, who remembered every patient's story, who held hands with those who had no visitors. "Carter, you can't save everyone," Dr. Williams often reminded her. Maybe not, but she could try. Imani poured herself a cup of coffee and gazed out her third-floor window. Across the street, a father was helping his daughter ride a bike without training wheels. The girl wobbled, nearly fell, then found her balance. The father clapped his hands and the girl's face lit up with pride. Imani smiled, then felt the familiar ache spread through her chest. Her apartment walls were bare except for her nursing degree and a small painting of the ocean she bought at a street fair. No family photos, no heirlooms passed down through generations, just the essentials and her books, medical texts mixed with mystery novels that kept her company on quiet nights. Her phone buzzed with a text from her colleague, Tasha. Night shift was crazy. 3 admissions in the last hour. The day team better be ready. Imani texted back a quick reply, then finished getting ready for work. She pulled her curly hair back into a neat bun and put on her blue scrubs. In the mirror, she practiced her professional smile, warm enough to comfort patients, but guarded enough to protect herself. The walk to Metropolitan Hospital took 15 minutes. Imani liked this time, watching the city wake up around her. Shopkeepers raised their security gates. School buses rumbled past. Couples walked hand in hand, completely wrapped up in each other. Everyone seemed connected to someone, while she floated through it all like a ghost. At the hospital entrance, Imani took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. Here at least she had purpose. Here she mattered. "Nurse Carter." "Thank goodness you're early," called Penny from the nurse's station. "Room 412 is asking for you specifically." Room 412 was Mr. Chen, recovering from hip surgery with no family nearby. Yesterday, Imani had brought him an extra pudding cup and listened to stories about his childhood in Taiwan. Such a small thing, really, but it had made his eyes light up. "I'll head there first," Imani promised, washing her hands at the sink. The day passed in a blur of medication rounds, chart updates, and patient care. At lunch, Imani sat with other nurses but remained on the edge of their conversations. They talked about children's soccer games, husbands' promotions, sisters' weddings. Imani had nothing to add. "Any plans this weekend, Imani?" asked Tasha, unwrapping her sandwich. "Just catching up on sleep," Imani replied with a small smile. She didn't mention the empty hours stretching ahead, the silence of her apartment, the book she would read cover to cover just to hear someone else's voice in her head. As her shift ended, Imani checked on Mr. Chen one last time. He was sleeping peacefully, his weathered face relaxed. She adjusted his blanket and dimmed the lights. Tomorrow he would be discharged to a rehabilitation facility. Another temporary connection, fading like all the others. Outside, the evening air had turned cool. Imani pulled her jacket tighter and began the walk home, passing restaurants filled with families sharing meals, living rooms glowing with the blue light of televisions, windows framing scenes of togetherness she could only observe from a distance. She wondered, not for the first time, if this was all her life would ever be, caring for others by day, coming home to emptiness at night. Like a ghost moving through the world, touching lives briefly before fading away again. Little did she know, her whole world was about to change. #A fateful encounter. The November wind cut through Imani's jacket as she hurried home from her 12-hour shift. Her bones ached with tiredness, and all she wanted was a hot shower and her bed. Dark clouds hung low in the evening sky, threatening snow, and the streets were emptying as people rushed to get home before the storm hit. Imani pulled her scarf tighter around her neck. Her breath came out in little white puffs that vanished into the darkness. The grocery store on the corner glowed with yellow light, reminding her that her fridge was nearly empty. With a sigh, she decided to stop quickly for some bread and milk. She was just a block away from the store when she noticed an older man walking slowly ahead of her. Something about his unsteady steps caught her attention. Years of nursing had trained her to spot trouble, and there was definitely something wrong with how he was moving. The old man suddenly stopped walking. He put one hand against a brick wall to steady himself, then swayed dangerously. "Sir, are you all right?" Imani called, quickening her pace. The man tried to turn toward her voice, but his legs seemed to give out. Before Imani could reach him, he crumpled to the sidewalk like a puppet with cut strings. "Sir." Imani dropped her bag and raced to his side, her exhaustion forgotten. She knelt beside him, immediately checking for a pulse. It was there, but weak and rapid. The man's skin felt cold and clammy under her fingers. "Can you hear me?" she asked, gently tapping his cheek. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. "What happening?" he mumbled, his words slurring. Imani quickly assessed him with practiced eyes. Pale skin, sweating despite the cold, confusion, classic signs of hypoglycemia. She reached for her phone with one hand while keeping 2 fingers on his pulse with the other. "I'm a nurse. I think your blood sugar is very low. When did you last eat?" she asked clearly, already dialing 911. The man just shook his head weakly. His eyes started to close again. "Stay with me," Imani said firmly. "What's your name?" "Harold," he whispered. "Harold Jenkins." When the 911 operator answered, Imani quickly explained the situation. "I need an ambulance at the corner of Maple and 7th Street. Elderly man, approximately 75 to 80 years old, showing signs of severe hypoglycemia." "I'm a nurse at Metropolitan Hospital." While waiting for the ambulance, Imani dug through her purse and found a small candy she had taken from the hospital's reception desk. "Harold, can you try to eat this? It will help until the ambulance arrives." With shaking hands, she unwrapped the candy and helped him place it in his mouth. Harold's eyes were frightened, reminding Imani of so many patients she'd seen, that moment when they realized their body was betraying them, when they felt utterly alone in their fear. "You're going to be okay," she said softly, taking his cold hand in hers. "I'm not leaving you." When the ambulance finally arrived, its red lights painting the street in flashes of color, Harold gripped her hand tighter. "Don't go," he whispered. Without hesitation, Imani turned to the paramedics. "I'm coming with him." It wasn't a question. In the ambulance, Harold's condition started to stabilize as the paramedics gave him glucose. In the harsh overhead lights, Imani could see him clearly for the first time. His face was lined with age, but there was a gentleness to his features. His silver hair was neatly combed, and despite his medical emergency, his clothes were clean and well kept. On his finger was a simple gold wedding band, worn thin with years. "My wife," he murmured, following Imani's gaze to the ring. "She's gone now. 5 years." "I'm sorry," Imani said, still holding his hand. Harold looked at her with tired eyes. No one would have stopped. Most people just walk by. Imani squeezed his hand gently. "Well, I stopped, and I'm staying until I know you're okay." At the hospital, Imani found herself unwilling to leave even after Harold was admitted. She spoke with the doctors, explained his symptoms, and made sure they understood his living situation, alone, no emergency contacts listed. As she finally prepared to leave, Harold called out to her from his hospital bed. "You never told me your name," he said. "Imani." "Imani Carter." Harold smiled weakly. "Thank you, Imani Carter. You saved my life today." Walking home in the now falling snow, Imani couldn't shake the image of Harold's grateful eyes. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she had connected with someone outside of her job. Something about his vulnerability and quiet dignity had touched her deeply. She didn't know it yet, but this chance encounter on a cold November evening would change the course of her life forever. Hashtag beyond the call of duty. 3 days after Harold was discharged from the hospital, Imani stood on his front porch, second-guessing herself. The small brick house needed paint, and the front steps creaked under her weight, but the welcome mat was clean and the curtains in the windows looked freshly washed. "This is silly," she muttered to herself, clutching a paper bag from the pharmacy. "I'm just dropping off his medication." But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Something about Harold's grateful eyes and quiet dignity had stayed with her. For the first time in years, she felt connected to someone outside of work. She knocked softly. When no one answered, worry crept in. She knocked again, louder this time. "Coming, coming," called a weak voice from inside. The door opened slowly to reveal Harold, looking tired but much better than when she'd last seen him collapsed on the sidewalk. His face lit up with surprise. "Nurse Carter, what brings you here?" "Just Imani, please," she said, suddenly shy. "I wanted to check on you, and I picked up your prescriptions." She held up the paper bag. Harold's eyes grew misty. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." Imani smiled. "I wanted to." He invited her in, apologizing for the mess though the house was spotlessly clean. The living room walls were lined with bookshelves, and a worn armchair sat beside a reading lamp. Photos covered one wall. A younger Harold with a smiling woman, travel pictures from faraway places, graduation photos with young people who must be his children. "Tea?" Harold offered, shuffling toward the kitchen. "Let me," Imani said, gently guiding him to his armchair. "You should be resting." While the kettle boiled, she noticed the empty fridge and nearly bare cupboards. The dishes were clean but showed chips from decades of use. Everything spoke of a life carefully maintained on a tight budget. They sat together with steaming cups of tea, and Harold told her about his life. He'd been a history professor at the community college for 40 years before retiring. His wife, Eleanor, had died 5 years ago from cancer. "My kids wanted me to move closer to them after she passed," he explained. "Thomas is in Seattle, and my daughter Judy lives in Phoenix with her husband. But this house," he looked around with affection. "Eleanor and I built our life here. I can't leave her memory." "How often do they visit?" Imani asked. Harold stared into his tea. "They're busy with their own families. Thomas calls every Sunday. Judy sends cards on holidays." The loneliness in his voice echoed something in Imani's heart. Before she left, she checked his blood pressure and showed him how to organize his pills for the week. "I'll come back in a few days to check on you," she promised. And she did. First with groceries, then to help change a light bulb he couldn't reach, then simply because it had become their routine. Every few days, Imani would stop by after her shift. Harold would make tea, and they would talk. He told stories about his teaching days and travels with Eleanor. Imani found herself sharing themes she rarely told anyone, about her parents' accident, the foster homes, her dreams of someday having a family of her own. At the hospital, her colleagues noticed the change in her. "You seem different lately," Tasha commented one day in the break room. "Happier." Imani just shrugged. How could she explain that she was spending her free time with an elderly man she'd met by chance? That his house, with its creaky floors and walls of books, felt more like home than her apartment ever had. When winter deepened and snow piled on the sidewalks, Imani worried about Harold slipping. She started driving to his house after her shifts, clearing his walkway, making sure his heat was working properly. "You're doing too much," Harold protested one evening as she cooked a simple dinner in his kitchen. "I'm just a strange old man. You should be out with people your own age." Imani stirred the soup slowly. "You're not strange, Harold, and you're my friend." The word felt new on her tongue. Friend. When was the last time she had a real friend? "Besides," she added with a smile, "you're teaching me all about World War I. Where else would I get such good history lessons?" As she drove home that night, snow falling gently on her windshield, Imani realized something had shifted inside her. The empty apartment waiting for her no longer felt like the sum total of her existence. For the first time in years, her heart had opened just enough to let someone in. What had started as a nurse checking on a patient had become something neither of them could have expected, a bridge between two lonely souls. #crisis and connection. The January morning dawned bitterly cold. Imani's car struggled to start in the freezing temperature, and she was running late for her visit to Harold's. They had fallen into a comfortable routine over the past 3 months. She would stop by before her afternoon shift with groceries, and they would share a quick breakfast together. Today, she'd picked up his favorite blueberry muffins from the bakery near her apartment. Harold had been fighting a cold all week, and Imani hoped the treat would cheer him up. She'd also grabbed some extra cough medicine, just in case. When she pulled up to his house, something felt wrong immediately. No lights were on, even though Harold was an early riser. The newspaper still sat in its plastic bag on the front step, collecting frost. "Harold?" she called, knocking on the door. No answer. The worry that had been a small knot in her stomach expanded into full-blown fear. She tried the door handle, unlocked, thankfully. Harold had given her a key weeks ago, but she rarely needed to use it. "Harold, it's Imani," she called into the quiet house. The stillness that greeted her made her heart pound faster. She moved quickly through the living room, then the hallway. "Harold." A soft groan from the kitchen made her break into a run. She found him lying on the kitchen floor, still in his bathrobe. A shattered mug lay nearby, coffee splattered across the linoleum. "Harold." She dropped to her knees beside him, nurse training kicking in instantly. His skin was cold and clammy, his pulse weak and irregular. His lips had a bluish tint. "Imani?" he whispered, his eyes struggling to focus on her face. "Can't breathe right. Heart attack or heart failure. Either way, he needed an ambulance now." Imani fumbled for her phone while keeping 2 fingers on his pulse. "Stay with me, Harold," she said firmly as she dialed 911. "Look at me." "That's it. Keep your eyes open." The 911 operator answered, and Imani explained the situation with the calm clarity of a medical professional, though inside she was terrified. This wasn't just any patient. This was Harold, her friend, the man who had become like family to her. When she hung up, Harold's eyes were closing again. "Harold Jenkins," she said firmly, the way she spoke to patients who were slipping away. "You are not leaving me. You hear? The ambulance is coming. Just a few more minutes." His breathing was becoming more labored. Without hesitation, Imani began chest compressions. She'd done CPR countless times at the hospital, but never like this, never on someone she cared about. She counted under her breath, trying to keep her own panic at bay. 1, 2, 3, 4, come on, Harold, 9, 10. Time stretched strangely. It seemed like hours, but was probably only minutes before the paramedics burst through the door. They took over smoothly, but Imani couldn't step back, couldn't stop holding Harold's hand. "I'm a nurse at Metropolitan," she explained quickly. "He's had heart problems before. I'm coming in the ambulance." No one argued with the determination in her voice. In the emergency room, Imani paced the waiting area while doctors worked on Harold. When a doctor finally approached her, his expression was serious but not grim. "Heart failure," he explained. "We've stabilized him, but he'll need to stay for monitoring." "Are you family?" The question stopped her short. No, she wasn't family. Not technically. But who else did Harold have nearby? "I'm the closest thing he has to family in this city," she said firmly. "His children live across the country." The doctor nodded. "He's asking for you." Harold looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, connected to monitors and an IV. But his eyes were clear when they found Imani's face. "You saved me again," he whispered. "That's getting to be a habit," she replied, trying to smile through the tears threatening to spill. "My kids," he said suddenly. "There's a red address book in my desk drawer. You should call them." Imani nodded. "I'll go get it and make the calls right away." "Thank you," he said, his voice growing sleepy from the medication. "For finding me. For staying." She squeezed his hand gently. "I'm not going anywhere." That night, Imani slept in the uncomfortable chair beside Harold's hospital bed, waking at each beep of the monitors. She'd called in sick to her shift, the first time she'd ever done so without being ill herself. In the early morning hours, as hospital staff changed shifts around them, Harold woke briefly. "Imani," he murmured, "you're still here." She leaned forward, taking his hand. "Always." Neither of them knew that down the hallway, the elevator doors were opening to reveal 3 worried faces, Harold's children, arriving sooner than anyone expected, about to discover the remarkable young woman who had twice saved their father's life. #revelations and invitations. Imani woke with a start, her neck stiff from sleeping in the hospital chair. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting stripes across Harold's bed. He was still sleeping, his breathing steady and stronger than yesterday. She stretched, wincing at her sore muscles, and checked her watch. Nearly 9 in the morning. She'd been here all night. A soft knock on the door made her turn. A woman stood in the doorway, mid-40s, with Harold's same kind eyes and silver streaks in her dark hair. "Excuse me," the woman said quietly. "I'm Lucy Jenkins, Harold's daughter." Imani stood quickly, suddenly aware of her rumpled scrubs and messy hair. "I'm Imani Carter. I'm a friend of your father's." Before she could explain further, 2 more people appeared behind Lucy, a tall man with Harold's build and a woman with his gentle smile. Thomas and Judy, Harold's other children. They'd all come. "You're the nurse who saved Dad," Thomas said, stepping forward to shake her hand. "The hospital told us what happened. If you hadn't found him when you did." "Are you the same one who helped him back in November?" Judy asked. "With his blood sugar?" Imani nodded, suddenly feeling like an intruder in this family moment. "I should go. Give you all some time with your father." "No, please stay," Lucy said, touching her arm. "Dad would want you here." They all crowded into the small room, pulling up extra chairs. Harold stirred, his eyes opening slowly. When he saw his children gathered around his bed, tears welled in his eyes. "All of you came," he whispered. "Of course we did, Dad," Thomas said, taking his hand. "We should have come sooner," Juby added, "not just when you were in the hospital." Harold's eyes found Imani, standing slightly apart from the family circle. "I see you've met my guardian angel." Lucy turned to Imani with genuine gratitude in her eyes. "We can't thank you enough. The doctor said if you hadn't started CPR immediately." "Anyone would have done the same," Imani said, uncomfortable with the attention. "No." Thomas shook his head firmly. "Most people wouldn't have checked on an elderly neighbor regularly. Most people wouldn't have known what to do in an emergency. Most people wouldn't have stayed all night in that uncomfortable chair." As the morning progressed, Imani learned more about Harold's family. Lucy was a school principal in Phoenix with 2 teenage boys. Thomas ran his own architectural firm in Seattle and had recently divorced. Judy was a pediatric nurse in Boston. They immediately bonded over hospital stories. When a doctor came in to examine Harold, Imani excused herself to get coffee. In the cafeteria, she found Lucy already there, staring thoughtfully into a cup of hospital coffee. "Join me," Lucy asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. Imani sat down, wrapping her cold fingers around a fresh coffee cup. "Dad's been telling us about you," Lucy said. "How you visit him 3 or 4 times a week. How you bring groceries and fix things around his house." Imani felt her cheeks warm. "He's exaggerating." "I don't think he is," Lucy said softly. "What I can't figure out is why. Why would a young woman spend so much time with an old man she barely knows?" The question wasn't accusatory, just curious. Imani stared into her coffee, searching for words. "I lost my parents when I was 5. Car accident. I never had grandparents or uncles or anyone really. Just foster homes until I aged out of the system." She looked up, meeting Lucy's gaze. "Your dad is the first person in a long time who feels like family." Lucy's eyes softened. "Dad said something similar about you. That you remind him of Mom, not in looks, but in spirit. Stubborn and kind all at once." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "We've been terrible children," Lucy admitted. "We call, we send cards, but none of us visit enough. We all got so wrapped up in our own lives." "He understands," Imani said. "He's proud of all of you." "Still," Lucy sighed. "This was a wake-up call. We need to do better." Back in Harold's room, the atmosphere had lightened. Someone had brought in donuts, and Harold was sitting up in bed, color returning to his cheeks as he told stories about his children's childhood antics. As discharge day approached, the doctors confirmed what they all suspected. Harold would need more care than before. His heart was weaker, and living alone would be risky. "He could come live with me," Thomas offered. "Or me," Judy added. "I'm a nurse. I could watch him. Harold shook his head stubbornly. I'm not leaving my home. Elena and I built our life there. The family fell silent at an impasse. Finally, Lucy turned to Imani. Would you join us for Easter weekend? At our family lake house. Dad loves it there, and she glanced at her father with a smile. I think we all want to get to know you better. Imani hesitated, surprised by the invitation. She'd never been included in a family holiday before. Harold's eyes lit up. Said yes, Imani. The lake is beautiful in spring. Looking at their hopeful faces, Imani felt something shift inside her, like a door long closed beginning to open. I'd like that, she said softly. Thank you. Finding her place. Imani stood at the edge of the lake, watching the early morning mist rise off the water. The Jenkins family lake house was nothing fancy, just a cozy wooden cabin with a wide porch and windows that faced the water. But to Imani, who had never been invited to a family vacation before, it felt magical. She had almost cancelled 3 times before the Easter weekend. What was she thinking, spending a holiday with strangers? What if they were just being polite? What if she didn't fit in? Now, wrapping her sweater tighter against the morning chill, she was glad she'd come. Behind her, the screen door creaked open. Lucy stepped onto the porch with 2 steaming coffee mugs. You're up early, Lucy said, handing her one of the mugs. Force of habit from hospital shifts, Imani admitted. The sunrise was worth it though. They stood in comfortable silence, watching golden light spread across the lake. Dad's still sleeping, Lucy said finally. This is the most relaxed I've seen him in years. When Harold had arrived yesterday, leaning on a new cane, his face had lit up at the sight of the lake. Eleanor and I bought this place when the kids were little, he told Imani. Best decision we ever made. The cabin walls were covered with family photos. Harold and his late wife as young parents, the children growing up through the years, recent pictures of grandchildren. Looking at them, Imani had felt that familiar ache of not belonging. But then Thomas had called her over. Help me with dinner. Dad says you're a great cook. In the kitchen, chopping vegetables beside him, the awkwardness had melted away. They talked about simple things, favorite recipes, hospital stories, the best fishing spots on the lake. By the time dinner was ready, Imani felt the tight knot in her chest begin to loosen. Now, as the day began, Lucy touched her arm gently. Come help me make breakfast. Dad says you make pancakes even better than Mom did, which is the highest compliment he could give anyone. In the kitchen, Judy was already mixing batter. Perfect timing. I was about to wake the boys. The boys were Judy's husband Pete and Thomas's teenage son Will, who had driven in late last night. As they cooked together, the sisters shared stories about growing up at the lake house. Tales of summer swimming, fishing disasters, and the time Thomas fell through the ice in winter had them all laughing. What about you? Judy asked, turning to Imani. Any fun childhood stories? The question hung in the air. Imani focused on flipping a pancake, wondering how much to share. Not many, she said finally. Foster homes aren't big on family vacations. She expected pity, the awkward silence that usually followed mentions of her childhood. Instead, Lucy handed her more batter. Well, you're here now, she said simply. And we have plenty of embarrassing stories to share. After breakfast, everyone scattered to enjoy the day. Harold and Thomas went fishing. Lucy took her laptop to the porch to catch up on work emails. Judy and Pete went hiking. Want to help me fix the dock? We'll ask Imani, gesturing to some loose boards by the water. Grandpa nearly fell through it yesterday. Working side by side with the teenager, Imani felt a strange sense of belonging. Will didn't treat her like an outsider, but talked to her normally about school, his friends, his dreams of becoming a doctor. Later, as afternoon faded toward evening, they all gathered again. Harold insisted on cooking his famous fish fry with the day's catch. Everyone had a job. Imani was put in charge of the secret family coleslaw recipe. Only family gets to know this one, Harold winked as he showed her the ingredients. After dinner, they gathered on the porch with drinks and blankets against the evening chill. Lucy pulled out old photo albums, and soon they were all laughing at faded pictures of bad haircuts and awkward teenage years. We need a new family photo, Judy said suddenly. All of us together. I can take it, Imani offered quickly. No, Lucy said firmly. We want you in it too. But I'm not, Imani started. Family is more than blood, Harold interrupted gently. It's who shows up. Who stays? You saved my life twice, Imani. You visit me more than my own children. He smiled to soften the words. No offense, kids. None taken, Thomas laughed. He's right. They set up the camera on a timer, all crowding together on the porch steps. Harold insisted Imani sit next to him in the middle. As the camera flashed, capturing that moment forever, Imani felt something she'd been missing her entire life, the feeling of being exactly where she belonged. #the family she found. 1 year had passed since that cold November night when Imani found Harold collapsed on the sidewalk. Now, on a crisp autumn Sunday, she pulled into his driveway with bags of groceries for their weekly dinner. So much had changed in these 12 months. The house looked different. Fresh paint on the shutters, new flowers in the garden beds, a wheelchair ramp beside the steps that Thomas had built during his last visit. But the biggest change was inside. Imani let herself in with her key. I'm here, she called. In the kitchen, Harold's voice answered. She found him stirring a pot of his famous chili, looking healthier than he had in months. After his heart scare, he'd finally started following his doctor's advice, taking his medicine regularly, eating better, even walking around the block each morning. His cane leaned against the counter, but he needed it less these days. Lucy called, he said, giving the chili another stir. Her flight gets in at 6. Judy and Pate should be here around 5. Sunday dinners had become a tradition. At least once a month, some combination of Harold's children would fly in for the weekend. The guest room was rarely empty now. You've got chili on your sweater, Imani laughed, setting down the groceries. She grabbed a dish towel and dabbed at the spot like she'd done countless times before. The refrigerator door was covered with photos now. Harold with Thomas fishing at the lake, Judy's children making snowmen in the front yard, Lucy and Imani laughing together in the kitchen. Among them was the Easter family photo, framed and placed in the center. While Harold finished cooking, Imani set the table. She knew where everything belonged now. The mismatched plates that Eleanor had collected over the years, the slightly tarnished silverware that Harold refused to replace because it was their wedding set. This house that had once felt like just another place to check on a patient now felt like a second home. Sometimes Imani stayed overnight in the spare room when her hospital shifts ran late. Sometimes she and Harold would spend quiet evenings just reading side by side, comfortable in shared silence. The doorbell rang. I'll get it, Imani called. Lucy stood on the porch, her suitcase beside her. You won't believe the day I've had, she groaned, pulling Imani into a hug. The flight was delayed twice, and the taxi driver got lost. Imani laughed, helping her with her bag. Well, you're here now. And just in time, your dad made chili. With extra beans? Lucy grinned. Would it be Dad's chili without them? Imani replied. It still surprised her sometimes how easy things were with Lucy. They texted almost daily now, sharing work stories and photos. Last month, Lucy had even flown Imani out to Phoenix for a long weekend. They'd stayed up late talking like old friends, even though they'd known each other less than a year. By 6:30, everyone had arrived. The small house rang with laughter and conversation as they crowded around the dining table. Harold sat at the head, beaming at his gathered family. Before we eat, he said, tapping his water glass with a spoon, I have news. Everyone grew quiet. The doctor says I'm well enough to travel now. His eyes twinkled with excitement. And I've always wanted to see the ocean again. Elena and I honeymooned at the beach, but I haven't been back since she passed. That's wonderful, Dad, Judy said. I've already requested time off, Thomas added. Just tell us when. Harold looked around the table. I want all of us to go. The whole family. Including you, Imani, he added, as if there had been any doubt. Planning began immediately, voices overlapping with suggestions about where to stay and what to see. Imani sat quietly, overwhelmed by the casual way that included her in the whole family. After dinner, while the others cleared the table, Harold beckoned Imani to follow him into the living room. From his desk drawer, he pulled out a small velvet box. I've been waiting for the right moment, he said, his voice soft. This was Eleanor's. He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold locket. I can't take this, Imani whispered, recognizing it from photos. It should go to Lucy or Judy. They have their mother's other jewelry, Harold said firmly. Eleanor would have wanted you to have this. She always said family isn't about blood, it's about love. With trembling hands, Imani accepted the locket. Inside was a tiny photo of Eleanor on one side. The other side was empty. I thought maybe we could put that Easter photo in there, Harold suggested. Your first day as part of this family. Tears streamed down Imani's face as Harold fastened the locket around her neck. In the kitchen, she could hear the others laughing as they washed dishes. Lucy was teasing Thomas about his new girlfriend. Judy was making plans for Christmas. Ordinary family moments that had once seemed impossible for a girl who grew up without a home. Harold squeezed her hand. You saved my life, Imani Carter. But you know what? I think maybe we saved each other. As Imani wiped away tears, she knew he was right. After a lifetime of searching, she had finally found what she always longed for, not just a family, but a place where her heart truly belonged.